Hi, it's Josh,
Hi, and it's Joe.
and you're about to hear another great episode of The Movies That Made Me. Most of the movies we're going to talk about with Ed Solomon today are available at moviesunlimited.com.
Yeah, don't waste your time streaming or looking for your favorites on TV. You can own them.
Physical media, babies. Yes, go to the trailersfromhell.com website, click the Movies Unlimited banner on the website, and you can buy your favorites from them, or go right to moviesunlimited.com. Shipping is always free on orders over $50.
Movies, movies, movies.
This is The Movies That Made Me with your hosts, Josh Olson
And Joe Dante.
Yeah, I feel like Ed, slowly but surely, we have met on every kind of electronic platform there is, and yet to meet in the real world.
I know, it's pretty funny. I know.
It's. Do you mind if I tell that story about AOL? Because I love it. You may not even remember it.
I don't remember it, so please tell me.
So, Joe, it's great. So, do you remember, like back in the early days of America Online? I remember I was on it early enough that I remember I'd been there for a while when they gave us all a free month because they had reached their 1 millionth customer. And I was part of this online screenwriting community. And I was still at that point just struggling. I was working crew and writing scripts by night. I think it was before I'd even sold my very first straight to video piece of junk. And somehow, we'd have these conversations of, hey, I'm writing a time travel movie. What are great time travel movies to study? Because it's also complicated. And I love time travel films. And it is one of those things. And Ed, and we'll introduce you in a minute, Ed. Don't worry. We do that eventually. But Ed can back me up. It is and I'm sure you can, where some people just get it and some people are just completely, I think it's like cilantro. It's like time travel movies just don't work with them and they can't.
They taste like soap to some people.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, if you want a movie that handles time travel beautifully, where they've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it and getting it right, you got to, check out Bill and Ted. And
I remember
Bill and Ted also suffered from that thing where a lot of, I think, sort of like thudding middle brows will go, well, it's about stupid people, so it must be stupid, which always makes me nuts. And out of the blue, I get this email or AOL mail or whatever for this guy, Ed Solomon, going, hey, I saw what you wrote. Thank you so much. Nobody ever appreciates how much work we put into that. And I was like knocked out. This guy's like a real screenwriter who is, by the way, our guest. And we started really nice correspondence. This has to be, what is this? Early 90s, mid 90s?
Yeah, it was AOL time.
This is whatever
that was. Whenever stuff eked up on your screen, I remember.
But I remember, and I don't want to get you in trouble with people these days because this sounds different than it did then. But Ed went on a trip to the Soviet, or no, it wasn't the Soviet Union anymore, to Russia.
Yeah.
And we had a live chat together. I mean, by a text while he was in Russia. And I'm sitting here in California and we're typing to each other. And it hit me that, like, this is it. This is the end of the phone company. This is the end of the world we live in, because it's just a quick hop from this to being able to actually talk to each other. And back then, like a 5-minute telephone conversation to Russia, it would have broken you. It would have been $1,000. And here we are just babbling away about movies or some such shit for half an hour while he's in Russia. It was kind of amazing. But,
also, at that time, I remember in Russia, right at the time, and I remember if we were talking about this in our exchange or not, I found out I'd been fired for the first time from Men in Black, first of 4 times.
Wow.
I was there, and we were talking about screenwriting, you and I, and we were back and forth. And I don't know why, but you mentioned the name of someone who I won't mention here because they were fired a lot faster than I was. But you had mentioned the name of this writer, and you had said to me, oh, he's doing some screenwriting advice. I don't remember what. You said he's doing online screenwriting advice. And I was like, oh, I'm going to look up this person and just see what he has to say. And it said about this person, he is currently writing Men in Black.
Oh, is that how you found out?
That's how I found out. I was sent away by a person who also shall remain unnamed, to go have a break. Why don't you take 2 or 3 weeks? You've been working hard. Have a nice break. You deserve it. And I was like, oh, fantastic. I've got some time off. Little did I know, they had given the script to another writer and had hired them for a few weeks. And
Wow.
that person
What a lovely business this is. Yeah, Ed and I
yeah,
worked
right.
on Ed and I worked on that picture for about a couple of days, I think.
Oh gosh,
Remember?
that's right. I so wanted
Joe, how did you find out you weren't on it anymore?
Well, I really didn't have any illusions that I was going to stay on it because there had already been a lot of turnover. But I did it. I just so admired the idea.
I remember.
And that was a different version of the movie than actually got made.
Yeah, when Barry came on, we switched it to New York.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, French Connection, but with aliens. And I remember taking the entire story of Men in Black and rewriting it. This was after I'd been unfired twice, I believe. And we took the story, and I remember just transposing it. And it was a fascinating lesson in writing for me because it was the same story, but set entirely different, not just different locations, but actually different characters because it was different locations, but the same story. Interestingly, different jobs, different occupations, same story, different plot, same story. Interesting. It was a really interesting lesson, and it actually freed me up in a lot of ways to realize that, if the underneath is working, if what's the subtextual is actually linked up,
yeah,
the incidentals are less important. Interestingly, it's the same reason I think that when an actor can't remember your lines, usually it's bad writing, because even if it goes all over the place in the scene, if it's following a deeper internal through line, the actor can place it. They can link it. They go moment to moment. But when they're having trouble remembering it, it's usually a writing problem. I have found that out.
Oh, that makes sense, actually. Yeah, because you sort of know what should come next if it's working. Yeah, no, that's great.
So Ed has a new movie.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. Don't we got to mention it, and then we'll stop talking about it because we never talk to people about their work here, although we're going to end up, I'm sure. But yeah, Ed's got a new movie out. It's on HBO Max. I say now, not as we record it, but as you're listening. It's No Sudden Move, directed by Steven Soderbergh, written by Ed Solomon.
Photographed by Steven Soderbergh and edited by Steven Soderbergh, but you won't find his name in any of those.
God bless him.
Because he doesn't like to take credit.
I love, yeah. I always have that moment where I'm like, wait, did he use a DP this time? You're like, oh no, that's his pseudonym. But it's Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro, and
it's a bunch of really good actors in a really fascinating plot.
I don't even want to give some of them away because I feel like there's at least one actor that you're not supposed to see coming that pops up. And it does have Bill Duke, though, our beloved Bill Duke, who Trailers from Hell Guru, friend of Joe's, and we're trying very much to get on this show. God damn it.
If I see him, I'll put in a plug.
Yeah,
thank you. Well, yes. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's wonderful. It's right where I live. It's, oh God, there's one thing I want to talk to you about before we went on, or maybe I'll talk to you afterwards, that having just done something that was set in that era that dealt with black gangs of that era. You guys did something so right that most people won't even notice, but we'll talk about it. I don't want to give anything away.
Okay.
But
cool. Well, thank you.
No, it's
thank you also for the other stuff. Thank you. Appreciate that.
No, it's a blast. And of course the Bill and Ted movies. God, the last one, I know it had to be depressing not to open in theaters, but I gotta say Bill and Ted Face the Music came to those of us locked up in quarantine at exactly the right time.
I appreciate that. We were initially kind of disappointed that people couldn't see it in the theater, but I realized actually, you know what? In a weird way, maybe this was better. First of all, it didn't do all that well when it first came out. So most people discovered it as it went along, so they discovered it on video or later on streaming and stuff. So there was that. And I thought, okay, also, it's kind of meant to be for families anyway. So in this situation, maybe it's not a bad movie to just watch in your living room. And, I don't know, Joe, do you miss the theater experience?
Well,
Yeah.
Specifically regarding this kind of movie, yeah. I mean, I think comedies are just funnier if there's other people around you. You just absorb this vibe. It's not that it isn't hilarious on its own, but anything that's funny is funnier when you're with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And I can only remember when I saw Night at the Opera for the first time, and it was in a summer camp in Woodstock, New York.
Oh God, yeah.
And it was packed house, an art house that they had, and there were people. The laughs were so, it was constant laughs, and there were some people who laughed so hard that they had to leave because they couldn't breathe. And I thought, this is obviously the funniest movie ever made. So then I took some friends to see it in Philadelphia at a theater underneath some trestle somewhere, and there were like 5 people in the theater, and it just sat there. And of course, it sat there because the Marx Brothers used to take the material out on the road, and when they were shooting, they would leave a space for where they knew the laughs were. So if you see those pictures on television, there's a space where the laugh is supposed to go, but it's not the same thing. It's not. You're not even seeing the same piece of art, because if you're not able to, if there's nothing there to fill in the gaps, then you're not having the same experience.
And they've actually done studies about the pheromonal interaction that happens in a comedy, which is why you're not supposed to test screen a comedy in stadium theater. And for those who don't know, I guess stadium theater meaning where your heads are, it's really rigged. So your heads are high above the person in front of you. Apparently, the pheromonal exchange doesn't occur in the way it does when you're actually closer.
No, that's true. And also you're almost in your own little box, so it's almost seeing it, as a private viewer. And we discovered the stadium theater thing quite early in my career, that you don't want to preview at a stadium theater.
Oh, really? Wow, that's
interesting. You discovered that without the science. You discovered it anecdotally.
We just picked it up.
Well, that's also, it's mob mentality, and it's also why riots occur and why crowds behave a different way than a series of individuals. It's all the same thing. It's that we're exchanging chemicals with each other all the time. It's a horror films. That's why I think horror films are better in a theater, just like comedies are better in the theater. It is all context with comedies too. The more people that are laughing, it's
spontaneous, and it's catching.
Well, it's funny too, because I'm not I'm not a complete misanthrope, but I'm perfectly fine not spending time.
You're a pretty good misanthrope.
Oh, come on, but but there are times where, like, and it is at a comedy, at a horror film, or at a concert, where all I want to be is in the crowd. Where everybody's sort of experiencing the same thing, where, like, outside of this room, maybe, we all have our differences. We all want to bash each other's brains in, but in here we are all laughing or screaming or dancing and singing. And it's, it's why we do this.
You're a uniter.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I love the Springsteen concert experience. To me is, and I like his music a lot, but the concert experience to me is much better than like the televised experience.
Yeah, well, that's because he draws the audience in. I mean, half the time they're up on stage with him.
Yeah. All right.
Actually, now I have to tell this story. I wasn't going to, but you've done it. So
this podcast just exists as a sort of a vehicle for his stories. Will Rogers used to.
We'll get to Ed. We'll get to Ed. But do you remember? Oh no, you're East Coast. So when Bruce was doing the reunion tour in '99, they opened the Staples Center here. It was the first bunch of shows, and he played 4 nights.
I was there.
Okay, so I had tickets for 3 of the nights, but not Thursday, the third night. And I had a friend who had a box, or a friend of a friend who had a box. Now, come on Thursday. And I went the first night, and I looked at those boxes, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be in that friggin' box. And I went on Tuesday, and I don't know if you remember, like, every night he would bag on the boxes. I was like, there's no way I do not want to sit in a room with a bunch of people in chairs having wine served to them during a fucking Springsteen experience. And so Thursday night, I went with a friend of mine, and we scalped tickets, and we got great seats. And we were going in, I remember going into our seats, and we had to pass the people who were at the end of the aisle, and we're stomach to stomach. And I look up, and I am literally rubbing bellies with Don Rickles. Why he's there probably with his family. And I looked at him, and I just put my hands together, and I bowed in front of him. And Rickles went, "Move it, you hockey puck." And we moved down the row. We sat down. My friend, who's younger than me, turns to me, he goes, what was with that piece? And that guy's an asshole. I'm like, you don't understand.
You don't understand what just happened.
That was a benediction. This is now going to be the best concert you've ever seen. And God damn it, it was. It was the best night of the run. So, but looking over and watching Don, I kept wondering, like, is Rickles going to be singing along? He was not singing along.
Oh, that's too bad.
That's too bad.
That would have been amazing. That would have been a surprise and amazing.
I want to see Rickles pumping his fist in the air, singing "Because of the Night." That would have been.
He was a really nice guy, though.
So, shit, we're out of time, but the movie is no sudden move. I do have one question, and Joe, I thought this would come from you, but what is the lens that he's using? It's such an interesting thing. There's this. It's a sort of a fisheye. It's a very minor effect. And
well, it's sort of like an early. It's sort of like an early CinemaScope lens because it's got the mumps, which they used to call CinemaScope mumps, which is that it stretches out the picture, but not necessarily on the edges. So the characters and the images on the edges tend to be a little bit squeezed, and so you notice it when the camera pans.
Right.
I was kind of surprised because I haven't seen that effect in years.
And yeah,
it was sure anamorphic from I think 55 or 54, the year that the movie was made.
Right. So I mean, it's very accurate to the time.
Yeah.
No, I loved it. And the funny thing is, the next movie I watched the next night was streaming, and we were having a glitch, and it was like this regular thing where it would just be this stutter. And I realized that, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, it's an interesting choice." I'm like, "Oh no, I just finished watching a Soderbergh film. This is not a choice. This is my Wi-Fi is screwing up." But because there's always these kind of interesting visual things going on in these films, and but yeah, it really works in this, and it's the movie's delightful. I don't
know if that's quite the word I would use.
Okay. And it does a thing you don't expect. And again, I'm not going to run anything you don't expect from something. And it's all so well put together. It doesn't have to do this, but and I hate to say this because I love genre films, and genre films don't have to justify their existence, but it's also about something else as well. That's all I'm going to say. Is it getting a theatrical too?
You know what? I think it's going to get a qualifying in Los Angeles through theatrical. I think at the Landmark. I don't think, I think it'll open just for that reason. So
there are so few venues in LA to run a movie now that there's no more Pacific theaters. There's hardly any Landmark theaters. I mean, the one on the west side is closed and gone. I think the Monica Fourplex is still there, but there's
sad. Yeah,
it's pretty sad. It's Hollywood. You can't find a place to watch a movie.
It's a very strange thing we're going through, and I'm curious whether movies will come rollicking back in the same way that I think. I wasn't sure up front whether I personally would be like the dog in the crate that got so used to the crate that when it was opened, I just wanted to stay in the crate, or whether I'd be the dog that just runs out into the yard. I think I'm the dog that runs out into the yard. I didn't expect that. And it seems like people, at least if New York is any indication, people are going to be very enthusiastically going out to things again. Will it be the same or will it not? Do you think we've trained people to stay home now for their movie experience?
But I was really heartened by the resurgence in drive-ins during the pandemic, and people sort of doing it was great that there were sort of quote unquote real ones. And in fact, I think Joe there was 1 week early in the pandemic where the #1 movie in America was Gremlins, which was showing at a drive-in. So my mind, and but there were these sort of pop-up ones that were starting to happen, and it was just like it was this need that people had, even if you're in a car, to be experiencing things together. That actually gave me hope. And in fact, yeah, that's right. And we had Joe Bob Briggs on the show the first time that happened. The first week a movie was #1 in America was playing at a drive-in, so he was very happy because and then I just one other thing I want to plug is it's so amazing and I love it, and it's such a huge impact on me. And in fact, the last time I talked to Ed, I called him up for advice because I was working on something that ran along these veins. But if you get a chance is Mosaic, you can still get the app for Mosaic, can you not? And watch it.
You cannot watch the branching. There's two versions of Mosaic. There's the branching narrative version, and then there's the linear version. And in Mosaic, we actually designed it to be branching and then cut it into a linear version as well. We're doing a new one together next year. And actually, the people listening can't see it, but you can see my boards. Oh, we're all on a Zoom, but you can see behind me there's that structure, and then
some branching there. Oh my God!
Well, but that's the hardest.
Tell me that's your office and not your home.
This is my office. It's a
Okay.
little 1-bedroom apartment that I rent as an office. And I'm just starting doing, I already wrote the linear version. This one was designed to be both. And I'm in the process of doing the branching version now. If you ever want to discuss another time, whatever, we can totally talk about it. It's really an interesting, complex, difficult, but really invigorating process, because to be forced to tell a story in an entirely different way, same story, in a, let's call it objective, where you the viewer are ahead of the characters because you're seeing, you're cutting between scenes, so you know more than the characters know, versus this fully subjective experience, which we're going to be doing. It's going to be a very different, entirely different, filmically, story-wise. It's going to feel like an entirely different endeavor.
Fantastic. Mosaic was riveting. My wife and I, Nancy, and I watched the entire, whatever it was, 8.5 hours, I think, in 2 days.
I really apprite that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
It was wild. And yeah, I was working on something sort of similar at the time. For a long time, we were. It sort of died when a new producer came in and went, well, because the thing with Mosaic, let's say for our listeners, and then we really will. We want to talk to you about the movies that you love. I'm sorry I'm bothering you by praising your work. I know people hate that. But with Mosaic, it was like you told a story and there's multiple characters, and you could at various points in time branch off and follow one character down a road or down another character down a road, and then go back and see what happened before and previously and jump ahead.
There was a very successful play called Tamara.
That's right.
That had done here in LA, where the idea was that it's
walk in whatever room,
like mansion house kind of thing, and you just follow the characters into different rooms, and you see different aspects of the story. And I knew some of the actors who were in it, and they said it was really interesting to play that kind of part in that way. The audience is just all right there in front of you.
Yeah, and you don't know when they're going to be following you or when they're going to follow someone else. And I would imagine live they'll be terrible because, like, is it me? Is it?
It's just boring.
But this producer came in and he was like, "Yeah, that's great, but why don't we give them choices?" And it was a project that I had spent years sort of designing and had written a feature script that we are now turning into one of these things. And the idea was to do what you guys did, which is to follow individual characters down paths. And he thought it'd be cooler if, like, at every moment, the characters could make choices and change things. And you're like, you can't just do that. It was.
We're not doing, like, there's the type that's more like you choose your own adventure, where
that's what they were trying to do.
The story.
Yeah.
I mean, with Mosaic, and the same with this new one that we're doing, which is entirely different.
Perspectives on.
It's really the same story.
Yes.
Seen from entirely different points of view. So it's a different story, or I should say same plot, or I don't know what you call it, same characters, but entirely different points of view. And, and the new one will be in the inner lives of these characters to such an extent that it would be an entirely different experience. And as a writer, it's actually hugely informative and helpful. And doing Mosaic was so challenging. But as Steve and I were saying to each other, like, when in your career, especially when you've been doing it for a while, do you get to do something that requires so many new muscles and so much rethinking of your suppositions about everything? Mm-hmm. And what a great opportunity to be able to just to grow,
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. Was it fun? Like, was it weird going back and writing a 105-page narrative screenplay after doing Mosaic? Was it?
It was a lot easier.
Yeah.
It was more freeing.
A lot easier than it had been before.
Yeah. Yes, it was easier than it had been before, because having been, I don't say forced is the wrong word, but like having it been this necessary to think about every character in your story as being worthy of their own movie, and then having to think about, how do you tell the movie from this point of view? Well, how do you tell the movie from this point of view? There was something a lot simpler about forming one storyline. There are other things that I like about longer stuff, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware. You can explore other nuances and different shades of characters, whatnot. But it felt like a relief to do what was supposed to be a 105-page script. It kind of was about 118 or so. But yeah. Also, I actually thought No Sudden Move, which was originally called Kill Switch, but there are sort of too many other things called that. But I thought it was going to be just this kind of really simple, stark, lean narrative. And I really was trying to write that. I didn't realize that it kind of is anything but that.
Yeah.
But it was really, I was really trying to have it be that, but whatever.
Oh, well, Ed, let me be the first to tell you, you failed.
I did. I fell. I fell on my face.
How many? There's so many characters in that thing, and yeah, they're all so interesting. Yeah, it's terrific. But anyway, we're going to cut all this because that's not why people listen to this. We want to talk to you. Yeah, but no, it's great. We've always wanted to have you on the show, and it's great to finally get you. Yeah, let's talk about. You want to talk about some of the movies that have inspired you and turned you into the creature you are today?
Well, there's two versions, I think. One was as a kid, like what made me want to do it, right? And it's funny because when I think about that, I think, God, they all occurred within a very formative period of my life, in adolescence. And I don't know, Joe, is that for you too? I mean, when you were talking about, I don't know, for the movies you guys reference, I'm sure you've talked about this on many occasions, so maybe you don't want to go there. But for me, I was, when you asked me the question originally, I thought, shit, they're like all within like a 5-year period. And most of them were comedies. The early Woody Allen movies, starting from Take the Money and Run and Sleeper or Bananas, Sleeper, Love and Death, Annie Hall, Manhattan, the Python films, the Python show, which is, I think the first Python I saw was maybe, and now for something completely different, the movie, or maybe it was
that's the movie version of the show.
That was, yeah,
which is basically the show, like, called together. And then, oh God, the first movie where I literally fell out of my chair laughing was Blazing Saddles. And it was also the first movie, I think, was that 72, 73? Like that?
74, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was the first movie that I saw on a repeat basis for a period of weeks every day. I just went, I remember actually falling out of my chair laughing at, of course, I was 12 or 13 at the time. So it was the farting, the beans scene where they were farting. I just couldn't believe that they were farting. And it was so funny to me. But it was the first those were like the first visceral experiences of film that I had felt. And I actually remember my parents had a store. They'd opened a clothing store in a place called Princeton Plaza in San Jose. And there was a movie theater there. And I remember I went to go visit them at the store. And then my dad took me, there was a theater in the mall, and my dad took me, and it was I think it was probably Take the Money and Run. And what was the movie before Sleeper? Was that Take the Money and Run? It might have been. But
I think it was Take the Money and Run, and then I think the second one was Bananas.
What's it? Take the Money and Run, Bananas. So it was Bananas then that we saw, because it was the one before Sleeper. Because then I remember my dad saying, "Hey, you wanna go see that guy's got another movie. You want to go see that?" And I remember thinking, that was the first time I thought, oh, people make, like, there's a signature to movie making, that there are people who make the movies. And we went, and it was like, oh, it's the same guy. I remember thinking, and laughing with my dad was a big deal. And that led to that sort of sense of humor, I think, is kind of what sent me into that certain realm. Those were the ones that I think that I truly emulated. In fact, Python might have been the biggest influence for me. Especially, I remember making Super 8 movies when I was then 12, 13. We started making Super 8 movies. And I remember trying to do a version of like a Python sort of thing. So that was 73, I'm going to say.
How did that go?
It was probably terrible. I do remember a couple things. I remember being blown away that they would have characters from one sketch just walk through another sketch. So I know we did that. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's horrible. I'm desperate to find, if I could, if they're, I'm sure they don't exist anywhere, but God, I'd love to find those things if I could ever find them. I don't know where they would be, but yeah. So that's like one version of that, like the early ones, but like in the recent stuff, I've taken to, like on No Sudden Move, talking to Steven about, hey, what are you thinking about? What kind of form, what sort of style? And And we did it on Mosaic, which is, he just said, hey, watch these movies. I watched a bunch of, early Kula films. I remember, Clute and Parallax View and Sterile Cuckoo and what's it called? Love and Pain and the whole damn thing and All the President's Men. Like, was just, Mosaic was nothing like it, but I was like, what's the feel?
Well, it's funny. Like, yeah, I get that though. You're right. It's like, I didn't get that from watching it. I didn't go, oh, there, but yeah, I can sort of feel what you're talking about there.
And it gets me into a certain mindset. And on this one I watched, I remember Rafifi and Point Blank, Get Carter. And there was a Japanese film. It's funny. There was a Japanese film, I think it's called Black Test Car, that was not available. I think it's actually on Blu-ray now, but he's like, there's this one film called Black Test Car from, I think it's 1962. You can't find it anywhere. I wish that you could find that and watch it. And I was like, well, let me look it up. And I looked it up. It was on YouTube. It had been put on YouTube that day by somebody.
It's amazing.
I watched it on YouTube, tried to watch it again the next day. It had been pulled down. Literally, for one window, it was there. I don't even know who put it up. And I said, I just saw it. He's like, how did you see it? And I said, it was on YouTube. And that's why, oh, that's right. And then I went to go find it on YouTube to send him the link, and it was gone. So for some weird reason, it appeared magically for me. But sort of watching this certain style of film, I have found that, I haven't been that type of a person before where I used to think that if I watched movies before I wrote, I somehow would be influenced in the wrong way. But I've realized that you can get into a kind of mindset, or it's almost like being in a key signature or a mood that you can write from, and just like you stand on those shoulders and then hopefully take it in your own direction.
Yeah. No, I do that too. You just sort of absorb a bunch of movies that you want to feel like, even if you don't want to steal anything from them verbatim, but it's just a way of getting into a mindset.
Yeah.
By the way, I just looked, Joe. There's now a Blu-ray of Black Test Car.
Really?
Black Test Car, The Black Report, and at the risk of being shabby and obvious, you can get it at Movies Unlimited, which is our sponsor. It
just happened to be our sponsor.
It just happened to be our sponsor.
Of course, we paid you to bring this whole thing up.
That's right. Checks in the mail.
Good dude. Thank you.
I want to. Are you going back to Woody Allen, or do you want to?
No, whatever. Where do you want to
go? Because I had a question for you, because I recently watched Love and Death again for the first time in 1,000 years, and I'm relieved to say you're a little bit older than me, but not enough. But so you were obviously I can't imagine, or I don't know. Had you read the material that movie is sort of pastiching in this age? You're what, like 14 or something?
No, that was my introduction to it, actually.
Yeah. So have you
read this stuff later? It was like, oh, that's what he was talking about. I didn't need it at the time. That was one of the other movies. I think Blazing Saddles was the first, and then Love and Death was the next one that I saw on repeat. That was the first. And it might be because I was old enough to drive when that came out. So I probably, could go back to the theater on my own. Although I went to Blazing Saddles a bunch, and I wasn't old enough to drive. But I just thought, it just seemed like he was doing something I'd never seen before. It seemed to me at the time, Yeah,
I don't think I even knew there was a material to be mined that he was mining. But because I recently saw have you seen the what is it? It says 7.5 hour Russian War and Peace.
No, I haven't.
Cannot recommend it highly enough. It's streaming on Criterion. There is a Blu-ray. You can also get it Movies Unlimited. But it's what is it? Is it 7.5 hours?
Say that again. Where can you get that? I hear you.
How do you spell that?
They're wonderful. We love them. No, it's 3 parts. I guess it won the Oscar in '66 or something. It was basically
the Bondarchuk version, right?
Yeah, and it's the Soviet Union going, because there had been a version made in the West.
Well, there was the De Laurentiis version, but that was
and it's like
truncated.
These people have taken our crowning achievement, the greatest novel ever written, and they've bastardized it. So, for the great glory of the Soviet Empire, we are going to make a movie that is the greatest film ever made. And they spent, I think somebody did an estimate of like adjusting it to modern dollars, and it's $650 million movie the entire Soviet army at their disposal, battle scenes you can't believe that they're shooting with a helicopter flying over miles and miles of people blowing each other up. All that said, the most amazing scene in it is a tight close-up of somebody, but it's unbelievably great. I missed it when it was in theaters a while back, but it is on Blu-ray and on Criterion. It's so good. And then I had to like a week.
Can you get it on Movies Unlimited?
Yes, you can.
Oh, glad to hear that.
but I watched Love and Death the next week, and I guess
considerably shorter.
Yeah, but obviously it played in America, and of course Woody would have seen it. But it's amazing how much of the visuals of that film he's kind of aping, and it's worth seeing if for no other reason than that. But it is also an incredible film. It will knock you out.
How did Love and Death hold up when you saw it recently?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
I've not seen it in decades. I'm curious, Yeah. I have found with a lot of the comedies that were influential to me that they didn't hold up upon later viewing, but we changed, the world changes, etc.
Yeah.
Where do you guys come off on this idea of, the art, like the art versus the artist and separating them? What's your stance on all that? Like,
are you about to confess something? Or are we going to have to, burn my Bill and Ted box set? Is that?
Because people might not want to see No Sudden Move after I say this. No, I'm curious, like, how do you separate the life of the artist and the work of the artist and what you choose to see and not see and that kind of thing?
Well, you don't separate it, because obviously the work of the artist is influenced by the artist's life and who the artist is. But in our current charged atmosphere, where anybody who got a jaywalking ticket is now suspect, there are people who have legitimate gripes against them, who happen to be brilliant filmmakers. And does that mean that their movies aren't any good? No. Does it mean that they are flawed human beings? Apparently. But that if you hold true to that whole thing, then you can't listen to Wagner. I mean, you can't. There's a whole lot of stuff you have to deny yourself, because the people who made it are not perfect.
So that's the question. Like, is it true in other forms too? Because if a philosopher, is a complete prick, do you just, do you devalue their, their ideas? I don't know. I mean,
it depends on how much of it has crept into their philosophy. If their philosophy is let's torture kittens, then obviously they're not much of a philosopher. So they wouldn't have gotten too far.
When we're creating things, you're theoretically tapped into some, if not higher self, other self. I mean, my sister-in-law has a thing. It's not unique to her, but she's the first place I heard it, which is, hate the jerk, love the work. And, if I started, I mean, Ed, what kind of career have you had that it would be news to you that there's a lot of bad people in our business? It's like, if I started only watching movies by people who are good and decent and kind, why I would just watch nothing but Joe Dante films all day long.
No, I know you'd be watching nothing but Miramax movies.
Right. But, but I think for our business, it was, I don't know, for me, the thing was more like, early on, I knew that, for instance, Harvey Weinstein was a complete monster to work with. I didn't know the degree to which. And I kind of had a thing with my agents because I had enough friends who had dealt with him and just had miserable experiences. And it wasn't some kind of ethical stand. I was just like, don't ever put me up for anything with that guy, because I can't. And then you find out how much worse he was. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't work with him. But I'm not going to stop watching the movies that were produced under his banner when he was.
Well, there's another story today in the Hollywood Reporter about Scott Rudin, who is another gem, who has worked on a lot of movies that won Academy Awards, and he's obviously a great producer in the sense that he has produced all these Broadway plays that were big hits, and he must have some sort of taste or talent. But as a human being, he's a complete zero. So. What are you going to do? I mean, even the people who collaborate with him and have collaborated with him have knowingly turned a blind eye to what they knew were abuses, but they weren't being abused, so they never said anything, and they're still working with him. So you can judge people somewhat by their associations, but the work is the work. Yeah,
in terms of just enjoying the work, I tend not to. It's like I assume nobody's living up to their highest ideals all the time, and that their work is in some way a reflection of those ideals as opposed to their failings. Yeah, Yeah, but yeah, there's a whole, like, you're not supposed to watch people's movies now or read their books because they were terrible. Where it gets funny for me is like with someone like Ayn Rand, who, apologies to our libertarian listeners, but it's just such a silly philosophy. And the fact that she was incapable of living by it herself, I think, is actually pertinent to the question there. I think that's quite different than somebody who's, a monster making movies about people who are decent. At least they're trying to, does that make any sense?
Well, with art, a lot of artists are very flawed humans, and their art is their bridge to connecting with people, or it's sometimes their aspirational self, or it's sometimes who knows what, and it is difficult. For me, I think the question comes to, and I didn't really have an answer when I asked the question, but as we're talking about it, I was thinking, you can make a choice as to whether to give someone who's alive now, who's an asshole, money or not. You can, that doesn't mean that you're not making a value judgment on their art. You're making a value judgment on whether you want to support them, I guess, as an individual.
Right.
But the art is the art. I do tend to think, and you're right, if you're preaching something and acting differently, well, that's worth noting. Yeah. But, a lot of great teachers are bad at what they actually teach, but they're great at teaching. A lot of, shrinks are probably horrible, fucked up people, but are good at helping you with your issues. So, I guess it just becomes, at the end of the day, here's a real kind of wuss out thing, but I guess it becomes personal choice, right?
No, I mean, do you think Alfred Hitchcock would have made those movies if he wasn't the flawed human being that apparently he was, and all the fears and the problems and the psychoses and stuff that he had that found their way into his work, that managed to speak to generations of people?
Well, no. How many truly, I really mean this, truly, let's use the word actualized, healthy, happy individuals make art. Like, I don't know.
Why would they? What do they need it for? It's like, they don't
no,
need
actually, it. Seriously.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. And also comedy, I do not know any funny, really legitimately funny person who has a healthy relationship with their mother.
Although I will say, have you spent much time, because through doing, I can make no claim to being any kind of horror person, a master of horror, least of all, but because I made one little horror film and do trailers from Hell and No Joe, and I'm sort of in this little thing, I've been invited to these masters of horror dinners in the past. And I have to say, I've been in rooms full of comedians, and I don't need to tell you what that's like, Ed, who have never been in a room full of just nicer, gentler, more well-adjusted, decent, and generous people than when you're sitting around with a bunch of people who spend their life coming up with interesting ways to butcher human beings. It's really, really interesting.
Get out of our system.
Yeah, exactly. I said that years ago. It's like I've everybody who's ever given me shit, I have killed, and they don't know it. But I have done terrible things.
That's another way of getting it out of your system.
Yeah.
Honestly, just get rid of the person altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But but I don't know. It's I don't think there are absolute answers. And then the question of, like, what if somebody awful, creates something that inspires millions to do good?
Well, that's the other thing. What's the trade-off, and what's it? That to me is valuable. And what's the collateral damage, and is it worth it? What's the cost of making the world better?
Yeah. And then you realize there's no way to know the answer. So I'm going to enjoy love and death. I'm sorry. But it did. What I really liked about it, though, was watching it now. And obviously, I've also read the book, a million years ago. But then having seen the film, what's interesting about it is it works so perfectly, as it did for you when you first saw it, and when I first saw it. Joe, when you first saw it, were you familiar? Obviously familiar. Had you read the source material at that point, or?
I was familiar with it, but I don't think I'd read it.
It just works 100%, even if you don't even know such stuff exists. You don't have to get all the jokes for it to
Well, there's
work.
not a lot of kids my age who are into Russian literature.
Yeah. but that's it, because I think there are some parodies that just function by you being familiar with the material, and then others.
Well, that it enriches them, but it doesn't. You don't necessarily think of how all the people who've seen Young Frankenstein and have never actually seen a Frankenstein movie.
Yeah,
it's run constantly on cable, but the old movies are hardly ever run, and yet Mel Brooks made that movie because he was enamored of the old movies, and so much of the imagery and the jokes and stuff come from specific references to the movies. But now the kids who see these movies, it's just a funny joke,
And I think in general in movies, there's a tendency when things get overdeveloped, especially in the studio system, for everything to be explained. Explain this more, and I actually think audiences don't like that. I don't think they need it. I think it's okay to have jokes that go over someone's head. I think it's okay to have references that people don't understand. It's okay for characters to be smarter than some people in the audience in certain areas. And, it's okay to have stuff you don't necessarily understand, as long as you kind of are viewing it as long as it's done with a good hand, and as long as it doesn't make somebody feel like bump out of the canoe, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think the audiences
tell that to the audience research people.
That's right.
I know, but I know. I think it's a real problem, because I remember liking the fact that I didn't understand all of what was in those. I remember going, oh, there's a bigger world out there that I don't really know about, and this person does, and maybe one day I'll find out, or maybe I would look stuff up or go. Now of course you look stuff up all the time. It's super easy. You don't have to go to your Encyclopedia Britannica.
It's even easier, yeah. No, I remember as a kid, because my dad was obsessed with Altman films, and I'm like 12 years old, going to Nashville and enjoying it. I couldn't begin to tell you why, and I would try to talk about it with my friends, and they look at me like a dog being shown a card trick. But it did. You just had that sense of, as you say, there's something more out there, and it gave me something to aspire to. Someday I'll get to see this film again, and I'll understand it better. So that it encouraged me to grow.
Doing comedies for studios is particularly difficult, because after they've seen the joke once, then they've seen the joke. It's not funny anymore. And that goes at the script stage, and it also goes after you've actually made the movie and you start showing it to them, and then they go, "Well, but you laughed at that last week. It was not funny now. Do something else."
The way, Joe, that was the case when I worked on It's Gary Shamling's show, which was Gary's first show before. And I worked on it for 3 years, I think, the first 3 years. And we used to hold jokes back that we really loved. Those of us in the writer's room. By the way, some of the nicest people on that show that I've ever worked with, speaking of that, I wouldn't say they're fucked up individuals. I would say they were funny, and they were funnier than I would have ever been. And really some great guys and women, and really wonderful people on that show. But we would sometimes, as a staff, if we had a joke we loved, sometimes hold on to it, because we were shooting Wednesday to Tuesday, or we might have been shooting Monday to Friday, but whatever midweek would have been, whatever the Wednesday would have been of the shooting week, Gary would often tire of the joke. And so we often would want to hold on to some of the better ones that we'd sort of throw out. They seemed fresher, and they kind of boosted it all. So it's not just studios. I think everybody gets tired of a joke.
That would make me a little crazy, though. Like, you have something brilliant, and now it's like, well, come up with something that's almost as good, and then put that forward as your best. I think that would terrify.
Well, you're always coming up with alt in those rooms anyway, but and it was always a crapshoot too, because it is weird. Like, when do you hold something back and when do you not? And obviously, usually you didn't do it, but it did happen. I remember a specific moment where we were told to do that, and we did it, and it worked, and we were like, "Oh, interesting. We're going to do this again. Let's always have a backup that we like at least as much." So, yeah.
Wow. And then I want to go back to Python too, because that was. So you saw the movie first, and then the TV series, and then probably Holy Grail,
something like that. I think I saw the movie. I don't remember what year it came out, because the TV series was on PBS, and it was released a little later than the TV show was released, obviously, in the UK. And yeah, so
it was around the same time as the movie, because the movie was sort of piggybacked on the on the success or interest in the PBS version.
So yeah, I saw, I don't remember which was the chicken and which was the egg in that case for me. And then I saw them at the Hollywood Bowl in 79.
Wow.
Whatever year it was, 80, whatever year.
How was that?
Great. And I remember going out to get popcorn, and John Cleese had come out into the back of the audience for some reason. I don't remember why. And I remember I bumped into him and looking up at how tall he was and watching him watch whatever that was. I think for whatever reason, I think it was a bunch of things were hanging, whatever sketch that was hanging from the stage. I don't remember. And then I couldn't believe I bumped into him. Spoiler alert, he did become my father-in-law later.
I was waiting for that shoe to drop.
Yeah, I knew you were going there. I saw the look on your face.
No, I wasn't, but as soon as you
and I actually said, it was pretty funny. I said, I bumped into this, and he goes, oh, that was you, was it? Oh, so annoying or something. I don't remember, but yeah. And then it's interesting too, because in a weird way, I looked at it and I once said to him, it's funny because you, my father-in-law, and my own father were probably the two biggest influences to me in a certain way. My dad and I would watch Python and we would laugh. My dad knew that I wanted to be a writer by the time I was in high school. And I remember he worked for Sylvania. This was before he had the store. He worked for Sylvania, and I guess it was before high school. It would have been when I was 10, 9. And I remember they had some TV show was using a Motorola. It was like a cop show. And I think it was made by Sylvania, Motorola and Sylvania, I think were somehow linked, subsidiary or something. And so my dad was brought down to be a consultant, for the show, and he came back with scripts. And so we sat on the couch and we would watch some pilot that was on that my dad had the script gotten, they gave him the script for, or this show, and compare it. And I remember that being very formative for me, both sitting there with my dad, but also seeing, words translated, humans acting them, saying them.
Yeah.
And then watching Python, and it's just funny. It was just a funny twist or ironic full circle thing that, specifically the work itself, the Python work, and the ability to be both brilliant and silly and ridiculous at the same time, to be sort of erudite and highbrow while being unbelievably lowbrow and being unapologetic about it, and the ability to break the fourth wall and the ability to include you, the viewer, into this idea that, hey, we're all watching a sketch show and we're performing it and you're watching it, and let's just be upfront and honest about it. That all seemed revolutionary to me because I hadn't seen Goon Show and I didn't see a lot of the antecedents. I didn't know a lot of Marx Brothers at that point. I didn't really know the history of film. I didn't have access to the history of film. There was no video at that time. I didn't grow up in a film family. So, everything was kind of fresh and imprinting for me at that point. Yeah.
Did you have something when you were talking about that? I just remember there was a book. What was it called? It had some goofy title, but there was a Holy Grail script that got published. That was, I think it was the first draft of the script and then the shooting draft back to back. And the first draft was about, I still to this day don't know if it was put on or not, but it came out shortly after the film and it had graphics and they'd scribbled all over it. It looked like you would want it to look, it wasn't just a book, but the first draft was about a suburban shoe salesman named Arthur. And then by the time they get to the last draft, it's, it's King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And
I wouldn't put it past them to have created a fake one, as just a kind of a piece of art in a certain way.
Yeah,
exactly. I actually don't know the answer to that.
But I think that was one of the first times I had ever read, because the other half was the actual script. And I remember sort of reading it and realizing, it's all, when you first start making that connection, that those words are connected to the thing that you saw. It's an amazing revelation.
Remarkable. It still is to me. I don't know, just the idea of watching something created and the idea of, seeing it all come together, or seeing people. To me, the biggest thrill in movie, I hate when the movie comes out. I don't like that. I don't know, Joe, how you feel about that, or Josh, but like I don't like it. I like when it's all private and it's yours and kind of, you know, it's not it's it's not for public consumption, and it's, you know, and people aren't judging it. And I like when it's the discovery of it. And my favorite moment, so my least favorite is when it comes out. My favorite is the first moment when the actors start saying it, when they're just rehearsing, when they're just breaking it down and, you know, just starting it. That's my very favorite moment. What are your guys' favorite moment in the process?
Well, you know, when the movie comes out, it's like you've pushed your child out into the world, and you know, it's on its own. There's not much you can do for it now. I mean, not that you don't try, and all of the time that there is left, and sometimes they don't even give you enough time to to get the child ready. They just say, that child's grown up, take it out there. You know, we don't care. My favorite part of making movies is the editing, because sometimes that's where you really discover what you're doing, what kind of a movie you've made, and then all on the directing side, all movie making is problem solving. So you know, you're problem solving from the very first time you get on the set to finding locations and all that kind of stuff. But then when you get in the editing room, that's where the problems are solved in a different way, because unless you have a lot of budgets for reshoots or something, this is what you've created. This is the stuff you have to work with. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's a character who pops and wasn't supposed to, and then there's another character who was supposed to be the lead, and they're kind of comparatively not that interesting. So now you have to find a way to rejigger your movie so that you can make the best movie out of the material that you've got. You have to perfect the movie that you made. And I think we all try to do that to some degree, and we succeed in varying degrees.
Do you find that film is more malleable in that stage than one would think, or less?
I think it depends on how you shot it. I mean, when you work for television, they insist that you shoot endless coverage so that the showrunners can come in and make the show that they've always wanted to do and wish they could do without the director, and sometimes without the writer. So that's not as rewarding, because the way I approach it is that I have an idea of what it should be like, and then that's the way I shoot it, and I try to do it in a way that they can't screw it up, but it's almost impossible. But at least you know that when they put the music on, it'll get better.
Right. I know. Do you have like a filmic lexicon that you're working from? Like, I know that this is going to be this type of, you know, these types of angles, this type of shot, this, you know, or do you just sort of figure it out as you're going?
No, it's kind of, I used to do detailed storyboards because that was what I was taught when I worked for Corman, but I relied on them less and less as I went on. It's basically instinctual. I mean, I know what I want when I know how to get it.
And you speak the language.
And I know how to make a decision, which I think is extremely important. And the crew can suss out somebody who's dithering right away, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, that's a thing which I've always not been great at myself, because I have a very visible process, and when I'm not sure about something, you know, it's apparently more clear to people than I realized. But would you, if you didn't really know an answer, would you give if you didn't have a real decision in your head, which do you like better, Joe, red, white, or blue, you know, in this, and you didn't really know, would you?
I'd say, what do you think? Or I'd ask the DP, or I'd ask somebody who cared. I mean, I don't really care what color the car is. You know, I'm not into cars, you know, and it's not a statement about the character. Oh, he's driving a flashy red car, so he must be a flashy red guy. There are many more important things to do than to respond to every decision that they ask you to make.
With actors, what about an actor with a choice? They're making a choice that, you know, will you?
Oh, that's fine. I think I let the actors generate. I like to have them adhere to the story and the script, but I let actors do what they want. And one of the reasons that I've worked with the same people over and over is because, you know, you have a trust factor, and they know that if they do something wrong, you're going to stop them, or if they overplay, or if they're not getting it, and because that was what you did the last time. You know, and if you've cast the movie correctly, you don't have to do a lot of directing.
I think, by the way, and I would put I would put in the category of casting your designers, your writer.
It's all casting.
Editors. Everyone is your casting. And then I have found in situations where I'm trusted to do my work, I do much better work.
Absolutely. And everybody does. And that's the whole point, because people actually feel like it is their movie, because you're letting it be their movie. Because you can't make it without them. You can't make the movie without makeup. You got to have makeup. So you got to have sound. You got to have it. When these people don't know what they're doing. And unless you've hired really substandard people, I mean, they're going to do a good job because they want to do a good job.
Yeah, I liken it to, I used to go river rafting every year. I loved it, and put in on one day and like go down the river and sleep on the river and go down the next day and the next day. And I noticed there's a difference between newer river guides and more confident, experienced river guides in terms of how much they would actually paddle. And the less experienced ones were just in the water with the paddles all the time. The more experienced ones could really read the river and just knew when to put it in. Like sometimes they just dip it in, move the boat a little, and then the boat would follow the tongue or whatever you call the sort of thrust of the river. It would know where to be. And I've always admired that. The more I've worked with different people, I've found that the people who do less micromanaging seem to be in more control. The least controlling directors are actually in more control in certain ways. There's more confidence. They inspire better work around them. And then their decisions are respected more too, because they're not making micro decisions all the time, going, or trying to micromanage something.
Right.
I mean, as you know, you're having to make a billion decisions with directing. It's just if you're an alien who's never seen a movie set or a movie before, and you were plopped down to watch a director at work, you'd think, well, this is just someone that everyone asks questions to all day. What are they an expert in that is happening here?
Do you find, Ed, that it's funny? I think about this a lot lately, where because I love writing things that I haven't written before, and I find that when you sit down to write your first, let's say, car chase, it's very exciting the first time. You're like, what can I do? What has been done before? How can I change this? How can I do this? When you sit down to write your 53rd car chase, especially if you're really good at car chases, it's just this muscle thing, and you don't have that passion and enthusiasm, but you can do it just as well. It just doesn't feel as exciting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I try to avoid that. I can't write from that point of view, that position.
Personally, it has to be something different for me. I don't know. And then I recently just had the greatest creative experience of my life, where I got to write 2 seasons of an audio drama that called Bronzeville. An amazing cast: Lawrence Fishburne and Omari Hardwick and Tika Summey, just incredible cast. And the time frame was so rushed. I had 3 months to write something like 600 pages.
Wow.
And there was barely any time for notes, and everything was riding on it. Plus, you couldn't use visuals. So it was absolutely terrifying. And it went by so quickly that I didn't get to be overly familiar with it. So that I actually had the experience of, when I heard the finished thing, of almost being surprised, which I feel like is the thing we all get into it for and we never get. Like, Joe, have you ever gone to see a movie that Joe Dante directed and been surprised at what happens next? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And you made the film because you wanted to see it, right?
Sometimes the projectionist drops a reel. That's always
And you're probably the only person in the audience going, amazing. Everyone else is like, shit. I don't know.
My memory isn't as good as it used to be, just because I've been doing this a long time, because I'm older. And I actually find it to be a fascinating thing, which is I will work really hard on a scene or a sequence. I'll be like in it and in a deep way. I won't have as good a memory of it 3 days later when I'm reading it.
Oh, yeah.
Which actually is interesting, because it's like, oh, I'm reading it slightly fresher. It's kind of in the early part, I would remember it all, and it was almost like I'd memorize it. It was harder to break out.
Right.
I find it easier to be critical of my work now. Interestingly, also been doing it long enough too that I know how, hey, if this isn't working, let's make something else up that works better. And I'm not as clingy to stuff. My ego isn't as invested. I work probably harder. And when I say my ego isn't invested, I mean I care deeply, but I don't take it personally as much if it's not working, which was always a big problem for me in the past,
Well, it's funny because that goes to, I think I've talked about at least once before. I came to, I think, the only working definition of success that makes sense for me via my grandmother's Alzheimer's. because I think the last time I saw her, I had just finished directing this whole low budget movie, and she remembered who I was and everything, and she's like, "How are you?" And I said, "Grandma, I just directed a movie," and she was so happy. I mean, just overjoyed because she knew how much it meant to me. And then 10 minutes later, she asked, "How are you? What are you doing?" And I told her I just directed a movie, and she was so happy all over again. And I thought, to me, like, success is you get to a place where you're still functioning, you can't remember anything, and there's a shelf of everything you've done, and you take it down, you read it or you watch it, and you're sitting there and you're going, "This is great. Who did it?" Like, that's it.
I would love to be in any situation where somebody every 10 minutes tells me how great I am.
Well, you're on the right show.
That's right. You're on the right show. We should talk more about these movies that made you. Wait, so you said, wait, did he mention? Yeah, he said the Marx Brothers, right?
No, he did Marx Brothers. He did Monty Python.
I did Monty Python. I was not I didn't know the Marx Brothers until later, until video.
Okay.
Able to get. So Blazing Saddles and Holy Grail both did a similar thing in the last 15 minutes or so of the movie. They just broke out of what they were doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That blew me away. In Blazing Saddles, when suddenly they're on a studio lot and they're just, the whole movie falls apart and yet it keeps going. Same with Holy Grail or whenever that was.
Try seeing it in the Chinese theater where they actually run out of the Chinese theater while you're sitting in the Chinese theater watching the movie.
Is that where you saw it the first time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. All the things where people seem to be with confidence breaking what appeared to be rules. Of course, they weren't really breaking rules. They all made sense within their own rule frame. But at the time, what I thought was just this bold and unabashed desire to just go for it. And the fact that I don't know if it was true, but it seemed to me at the time that they were having so much fun making it. It seemed like, and from talking to the writers of the Python films and the writers of Blazing Saddles, it seemed like they actually were having fun. They were really making each other laugh. And I mean, to your question, Josh, about sort of doing the thing you're used to doing, I mean, I think it's the death of comedy and it's the death of writing when you feel like, oh, I got this. As soon as at least for me, as soon as I think that, it's over. And I try to keep myself out of that place. I've said this in the past, but outside my comfort zone, but within, I guess, the wheelhouse, whatever that is. Like, how do you just keep yourself pushing? And those movies, to me, to this day, I can also feel people really trying to push themselves. And in fact, Bill and Ted, which is how I met Joe, actually, was that script. And way back, I was a freaking kid. And we were doing an improv group to just work out and push ourselves. Not in front of an audience. We didn't want an audience. We just rented a theater once a week, like a shitty, cheap little theater on Sunset Boulevard, the Gardner Stage, it was called. $20, I remember we paid per night when we rent it, once a week. And we were just trying to push ourselves in the ways that we perceived that Woody Allen was doing in films like that, Mel Brooks was doing, the Pythons were doing, just trying to see how far we could go without breaking the seams, and it was, a lot of failure, of course, and a lot of stuff that just, would never fly. But it was how we discovered the characters of Bill and Ted. It was a random day and a random, just a random, I wouldn't call them sketches. It's not like we did sketches. We just would just do shit and start
fuck around with characters.
Fuck around. And then, and we were not doing what a lot of, UCB and Groundlings people do, which is we weren't trying to strip mine characters to then make a pilot or a TV show or a movie out of. We were just trying to explore. And those movies we often referred to as the sort of touch points for us of what in the most aspirational way possible we would like to even get close to. Of course, never really did, but at least they were a guiding, the North Star, so to speak,
Yeah.
And I think it was the fact that it felt like they were making each other laugh. And from what I got to know about how they did it, that is what they were really trying to do. Truly trying to make each other laugh and make themselves laugh. And that to me is the best comedy. That's like the only time with comedy. But even with stuff like No Sudden Move, which is obviously not a comedy, but it was a real challenge to me to write, because it's not in what, I mean, Stephen, I have to say, to his credit, giving me the shot on Mosaic, which was because we had done a little 10-minute demo version, not of that story, but we worked together to try and create a little short to see if the branching thing would work. And he took a real shot on me with Mosaic, because it's not something I was, quote, known for doing. So we're back to the thing about when you're trusted, you really step up. But also No Sudden Move was a new sort of style for me too. And the fact that he trusted me, he and Casey Silver trusted me to do that, was hugely meaningful. And so the challenge of doing it, I took really seriously. And of course, I'm sure you remember these moments. I have them in every project. I was like, there was a moment where I just didn't know what I was doing. Like, didn't know
what
how
am I doing here?
Yeah. Oh my God, they're going to all find out. There's always that. There's the imposter thing.
They'll find out at last.
At last, I feel that on every project.
There's
I've
always
never
a part.
not felt that.
The thing it always feels to me like there's always, and it's even if it's something just writing for myself, there's at least a week where the whole thing feels like I've taken a car apart and all the pieces are lying on my floor, and I suddenly remember I have no idea how to build a car. Because having never done this, I will guarantee you it's easier to take a car apart with a screwdriver than to put one back together. I know that. That's what it feels like, right?
It's true of almost anything.
Yeah. I think that's probably what is it? The second law of thermodynamics. So I don't know. I'm sure wrong. I'm sure I'm wrong, but after I said that word in the middle,
things fall apart
to me anyway. So no, I'm sure. Like, for me, there's always that moment where I'm certain that I can't do this. And the only thing that's different now is I've done that enough where at least I can go, hey, dude.
Yeah.
Remember last time you felt this? This is that. But then in my brain, the dialogue is, no, this one's different. This one's different.
This one's always different. This one's always different. It's always different too. And you know that deep down in your heart, you know you're lying to yourself. This is the one you're going to fail.
Yeah, and I remember thinking on No Sudden Move, I'm going to have to say to Stephen, I just don't think I'm got a handle on it. And then I figured out what the story was going to be, like what it was. And I was like, oh, thank God I didn't make that call.
But didn't he have a story in mind when he came to you?
He wanted to do, initially we were going to do a bigger kind of heist movie that was going to take place in many parts in the country. And then we started throwing some ideas around. And then he was like, actually, let's do something smaller. Let's set it in Detroit and let's make it, as I was saying before, like a more streamlined, like really stark. Like initially we were talking sort of 70s noir feel. And it evolved into more 50s noir feel as we decided we're setting in the 50s.
Because it has kind of a Desperate Hours feel to it.
Very much, yeah. That was one of 10 movies I watched to sort of get in the mood. There was, I think I was mentioning, some of the others like Rafifi and Get Carter, Point Blank. I remember,
Which Desperate Hours did you watch? The original or the remake?
Yeah, the original.
Yeah.
He when we were talking about it, what he wanted to do was let's do three guys who've never met paired together we talked initially a heist, but then it became this sort of like a Desperate Hours, almost like this babysitting gig while they're going to watch this family while one of the people goes and takes something out of a safe. Well, the father of the family, the husband, takes something out of a safe, and it goes drastically wrong. Like that we knew. And we did a series of meetings at his office, a couple hours a day for a week or so, throwing ideas around, talking about stuff. And there was one point where he even wrote some random dialogue, kind of as this is the tone, not like these are scenes to go in the movie, but more this is the tone, the feel. And some of that is in the movie. You know, there are some pieces of each of those that are in the movie. But that was great for me. I loved having that to work with as well. And then I started to do, once we decided we're setting it in Detroit and it's going to be these, this crime that goes tremendously sideways and all the repercussions after that. I started thinking about, well, what would it be the backdrop? And two things kind of hit me close to the same time. One was I was doing some research and realized that we knew we were writing for Don Cheadle as well, by the way. We didn't know who the rest of the cast would be. So I was like, well, what are the issues? What's going on in Detroit at this period? And well, of course, what ends up being the MacGuffin in the film was one thing that was happening. I won't say that because it sort of served as a spoiler, but
it does. Yes, I was going to stop you if you did.
Yeah, thanks. And then, but the other thing was the backdrop of the evisceration of these African American neighborhoods that were thriving, that were torn apart, basically razed, bulldozed to put freeways in, and the change in America that was happening as the auto companies and gas and oil companies and tire companies were pulling up the trolley tracks and making the freeways, basically building the suburbs. And that's not really a huge part of the movie, but it's the backdrop, and in a way is like the meat of it to me. It's the ether, I guess, through which the movie.
Well, it's in that small group of movies, and it's all there. It figures less prominently in yours than it does. I was trying to think of something else. It's a different city, but Chinatown and Roger Rabbit were the two movies that came to mind, where kind of films similar era, kind of using stuff like that as a way of getting into a great kind of crime story.
Well, talk about the North Star. I mean, Chinatown being aspirational for all of us. But I personally liked that it had that element. Like for me, that just made it a little meatier. It gave Don's character, I think, a little more sort of moral imperative. And I found that more, a more interesting dynamic, and the set against the racism that was happening at the time, especially in Detroit at that time, was hugely racist. So the idea of having these two characters, one who is, actually racist, and sort of watching these two people and their interactions as this sort of cat and mouse between them. Once I realized that's what this is. It's not a heist movie per se. It's a story of these two people, this back and forth between these two people, constantly trying to fuck the other one over. That's when I went, oh, okay, I know what it is. And it told me now how it needs to be done, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as do you remember the first time you saw Chinatown?
Yeah, I do. It was on video, rented video. So it would have been, and it was in my apartment in Westwood, which would have put it in the between 1980 and 85. So yeah.
Did it hit you then, or did you have to see it in a?
I thought, this is great. I'll never literally remember thinking, there is no way I will ever be able to do that.
Right.
It felt like alchemy that I will never understand, magic. And I also remember thinking, oh, it's interesting. I remember thinking this on my first viewing, and I actually asked Robert Towne about this when I met him. I said, you do something in Chinatown. Was it on purpose? Like, were you as the writer doing this? It's like every time when a conversation would naturally go to the next question, like, but wait a minute, then why? The scene gets interrupted, and they don't get to ask it, which just keeps us like hanging. And he said that was Polanski, actually. He said initially I had a lot more like beginning, middle, and ends.
Right.
And he said that was but funnily enough, 4 days ago I was sitting with Steven in just in a little screening room he has in his office, and we were going to watch a cut of something else. And while we were waiting for it to load up, Chinatown, this was on a random channel in the middle of the movie. And we just did that thing, which I do with The Godfather. And there are these films, I'm sure you've got those too, where if you just happen to
watch it. You gotta watch it.
Can't stop. Exactly.
Yeah.
You just suddenly, we were just staring at it like we were cavemen looking at a fire. And 20 minutes had gone by. And that, to me, that's how I know a movie. I feel like a movie, like to me, the great films, you can join midway, and somehow they have this consistent DNA that almost it still engages you because it's firing on every cylinder for some reason. The whole chemistry is working. I don't know. Do you find that to be true?
Some of my favorite movies, you were talking about how you first started thinking about writing and so forth. But for me, it was as a kid, my dad and I would go see like Papillon, and Papillon sold out. So we like, what's playing, at the theater down the street? Oh, Charlie Varick or The Sting or whatever. And you'd walk in and it was like, oh, it started 40 minutes ago. I'd be like, we'll watch it and stay for the beginning. And somehow those movies still riveted me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't do that anymore.
Can't do that anymore. Yeah, you'd wait 5 minutes and then it would start up.
But now they kick you out of the theater. So
there's so many movies I love that I started from the middle and then saw the beginning later.
Well, that was sneaking into the theater days too when you were little. Yeah. You just sneaking into the movies. That was the thing. Sneaking in one movie. Now we're going to the next movie. That's what the megaplex was invented for, I thought,
Yes.
Like, oh, now we're going to spend 9 hours at the movies and
only pay for one.
And here's my question, Ed, and I'm going to judge you harshly if you answer wrong. Were you ethical about it? Because I would always buy a ticket for the small indie film. Even if I was going to go see Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. So you make sure that the little guy gets the...
I would do that sometimes, actually. Because I would pick the movie that I wanted to support. I remember. Right. And then buy the ticket to that. And then, I guess, who knows?
Walk out of the others if they were.
Yeah, that was also that feeling of power you felt as at whatever age you were of like, this is not working for me. I am choosing to abandon it. I am beyond and above these filmmakers because I can walk out and I paid nothing. I win. God dang.
Exactly. Now, see, I really want to go to a theater and do that.
If you go to a theater, you should make sure it's playing this particular picture.
Well, that would be one theater in LA, I think. Otherwise, it'll be on HBO.
And here's the irony that hit me when you said that. It's like they're doing it for Academy consideration, and yet probably 99.9% of the people who vote in the Academy are just going to watch a screener anyway.
Well, that whole Academy thing, don't get me started. I mean, it's such bullshit.
Yeah, you mean how it's
how it's administered, and it's a mess. It's a real mess. And the whole world has changed, and these people are still, it's 1958 for them.
Yeah, it's interesting how I have a weird feeling that now that so many filmmakers who even 2 years ago were saying it's not a movie if it's on a streamer are now making big streaming deals.
Yeah.
And
one in particular.
as referenced earlier, I remember that meeting that we all had. I felt, for a different conversation, but my suspicion is that I bet there's going to be a change in Academy qualifying rules soon.
Yeah.
Just because too many powerful people are going, you know what? This is how we're making movies now. By the way,
the world has changed.
As a film goer, I hate to say this out loud, but for a lot of movies, my experience is better when I'm watching it at home. It just is. I don't have to deal with people on their cell phones or eating. I don't even like people eating popcorn next to me. It distracts me. It's too loud. I like to see the pure experience. And
spoken like a person in your age group.
There's certain films. I mean, it's funny because like Lawrence of Arabia, I'll always go see when it plays the Dome if they ever open it again. But yeah, there's certain films like I have a very nice setup here, and your movie looked amazing on it, and it was like the perfect situation to see it. We have great sound and all that. But then there's something like, in fact, we had the director on a while back, Nobody, which is a hoot, the Bob Odenkirk action movie, and it is. And I say this with nothing but love for the film. It's a much dumber movie. than yours. It's it's meant to be. And you're sitting there and you're like, this would be a million times better in an audience.
Well, that's what we were saying earlier. There are movies that we want to see with an audience, but for a certain amount of movies, first of all, I see the screen better. It's bigger in comparison to where I'm sitting. And I don't have to deal with people getting up and walking and making noise. We did screen it at Tribeca in this gigantic screen. And gigantic. And it was the size of 2/3 of a football field is where it was screened for. I mean, it was 675 people spread out, it was the other day. And it reminded me of what that experience actually was. And I realized, maybe my sequestering of myself that's happened not just in the last year and a half, but sort of as screens have grown and the theater experience has gotten more expensive and also more sticky and more just inconvenient. Maybe I'm denying myself something, which is an experience that only movies really can give you. And as movies and TV shows are starting to, I don't even know sometimes whether I'm writing a movie or a long movie or a short series anymore. And sometimes don't even try to define it. As that's changed, we have to figure out how to make the movie going experience something that is for everyone again, and not just for little art films and giant superhero movies. We have to figure it out, or it's just all going to be television.
I hear 3Ds. Then I'm kidding.
What happened to that?
It'll be back. Once we're back in theaters.
No, they're still doing 3D, cartoons and.
Because they didn't last year.
Those things are all in 3D because they push a button on the machine and it turns it into 3D. It's not like real 3D, like shooting it in 3D, which I tried once and was basically disabused of afterward. What are you doing? What's the point? Why do it for real with real, two different lenses and stuff?
Well, I will say, and I shouldn't be buttering up my co-host, but every single shot of the whole is beautifully composed for 3D. It's such a blast to watch.
A lot of good it did me.
Hey, I don't care. It did me a lot of good. That's all that matters, Joe.
What I want to see in 3D is not, people pointing a gun at camera so that you see the long barrel of it.
Right.
What I want to see is actually human interaction in 3D. That's what I would be really interested in.
Well, that's what I thought it was good for. I think it's drawing people into the movie as opposed to throwing things at them. But you happen to have a particularly good lens on your machine there. So when you stick your fingers out, it really
I know, that was amazing. 3D. Yeah, it was 3D. Next up, 3D Zoom calls.
No.
Well, Ed, thank you so much.
Ed.
I think we've broken almost all of our rules. I feel like we actually talked about his work.
No, we talked about a whole lot of interesting things that were
I'll cut all that stuff.
Litany of titles.
To Rachel, the PR person, don't worry, I'm going to cut out every reference to the movie you guys are plugging. So this will be.
She knows.
Silent.
She's watched the show.
Ed, thank you,
everyone. It's great to see you, Joe. Again,
you too.
Really, really a joy. And Josh, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, it was an absolute blast.
Thanks, Ed.
Good luck with the film.
Great luck with the movie. I think it's going to be a big hit.
Check it out. It's out now.
As big a hit as movies can be these days.
That's right. But it's out now on HBO Max. So check it out. Our show was recorded from several well-stocked bunkers. We can't wait to get back to beautiful downtown Burbank. We're the official podcast of trailersfromhell.com, the best damn movie website there is. Our engineer is the composer Don Barrett, who also transmogrified, produced, and created our theme song. This is Josh Olson for the Movies That Made Me. Stay safe out there, folks.